I received a call from Tim. This isn't like a paid call or anything like that. He wanted to comment on um, the minimum wage in Wisconsin, which is something that we have talked about during the last two local half hours, the What's Been Happening segment at 8:35. He's going to be calling in at 9:30, and we're going to continue that conversation because I will say there's a lot that I appreciate about what Tim does as a business owner in the area, but he wants to weigh in on the concept of increasing the minimum wage, paying somebody with a capacity to live with dignity, and what's really going on with the cost of living in general. And I offered it to him. It's kind of an on the whim. I was going to do a minimum wage segment by myself, but I obviously welcome his call and anybody else who wants to chime in on the matter as well. That's going to be in about 20 minutes. So not yet. I have something important that I need to get to first. It's going to seem at first like it's not important, but I promise you it's going to take a hard turn into very important. We've got a lot to get into, not a lot of time to get into it. So let's just do it. There is a conversation going on in the world of politics right now that I would like to weigh in on in a way that probably isn't going to be too shocking to regular listeners right now. The situation involving the men and women's hockey team has become very politicized. Unfortunately, not through any fault of their own, in my humble opinion, but here we are. At a time where Cash Patel is there drinking with the winners, which again, as someone who doesn't like Cash Patel, um, of course, I'm just like, why'd he have to be in those pictures? But I also know that there are politicians that if they went and were partying with an American team that ended up winning a gold medal, wouldn't even register with me. So that's not the part of this entire conversation that bothers me because I'm sure I don't know who they are because the guy defends pedophiles, but I'm sure there are people that still appreciate who Cash Patel is. Probably all of them are related to him, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. Um, but I do want to highlight another conversation that is going on that is permeating this men and women's hockey team conversation. And that's the fact that the men's team got a call from the president and the women's team didn't. And the president, Donald Trump, was making jokes about calling the women's team, about what he thought about women's sports, so on and so forth. The men's team is taking a little bit of heat for laughing at what was going on. And it's becoming a bit of a story in a place where there wouldn't be one. And to be perfectly frank, not the kind of story that I oftentimes jump into. This is the exact kind of tribal nonsense that I typically stray away from. But there's something that bothers me about this. And maybe it's because I can see versions of myself. Like, to be perfectly honest, I am an evolving creature. I always have been. Now I'm close to Charizard status, but I started off as a Charmander, right? Not only is it the lowest evolved form of that Pokemon, but it's the most difficult one to pick if you're playing Pokemon Red or Blue. Real gamers know what I'm talking about. Have fun trying to beat the water gym with a fire Pokemon when you're a child. Have fun with that. Um, I'm always evolving, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that when I was 14 years old, I had the nicest things to say about women's sports in regard to men's sports. You kind of have to grow into it. Now, with the success of the women's USA soccer team for my entire life, with Caitlin Clark kind of dominating the WNBA and shooting the ball with a precision that is really only reserved for some of the best athletes in the NBA, with the women's hockey team securing their third gold medal. Again, the last time the men's team did it was that 1980 Miracle on Ice. The women's team has medaled every year since 1998 and has received the gold medal 3 times. They absolutely have outperformed the men's team in every single way, and I think they are a very large mark of pride for America and for athletes in general coming from this country. Um, I don't like seeing this end up as the butt of a joke. And it's only because, as I highlighted last week, jokes are supposed to punch up, not down. And women's sports has been fighting a battle for a very long time, trying to gain respect of people in this country, trying to find a foothold in the media markets as well as through advertising, generating interest through younger viewers, so on and so forth. And I'm all for ribbing, having a good time, but not in moments like this that undercut such a great achievement. And it's pretty difficult to ignore that the butt of the joke always seems to end up being the women's teams in these regards. And I was part of the problem at one point in my life. I'd like to think I haven't been for a very long time, but I definitely was part of the problem at one point. And I think that's probably why this cuts a little more than it normally does for me, is because I am embarrassed that I used to be that way, and I'm more embarrassed that there are people that get defensive and will defend the president talking about this sport the way that he is. Now, I am not going to turn this into an entire segment, but I want to use this as a jumping off point because this kind of chauvinistic behavior is still very prevalent in society, and it's pretty difficult to ignore. In case in point, I do not do a lot of abortion segments on this program anymore. I did a bunch when I first started, and I was kind of finding my footing in radio. I have found that abortion conversations, if you're looking for low hanging fruit, it's very easy to do. Whether you're pro choice like myself or pro life like the Quakers that exist in society still, it's easy. All I have to do is say women should be able to make their own decisions. And inevitably, there's a bunch of angry, specifically dudes and occasionally a woman being like, actually, they don't have the right to do blah, 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 blah. And, that's 2 hours of content here and gone. Nobody learns anything. Nobody's mind is changed. Nobody actually gains any information to apply to a future conversation, a future decision, and we go about our business. Again, there's a handful of topics that I used to kind of rely on when I didn't know how to fill 2 hours of content. And now, anyone who knows me, like, listen to this show for 7 minutes, and you can probably guess where I come down on the abortion access conversation at this stage of the game. And I don't want to waste my time specifically or anybody else's. If you ever are listening to this show and I'm just having a straight abortion conversation, please know that I didn't prep the day before, and I was looking for something to say that would fill 2 hours of time to make sure that I was going to get paid that day. Because to me, that's what a lot of people who have this job do. They're just like, actually, I think women are property, and I'd like to trade one for a couple of goats. And fill in the next 2 hours of liberals that'll be screaming that inevitably will be mocked by conservatives, so on and so forth. When I would do those abortion segments, inevitably I would get emails and texts off the air with like, Ben, how about the women that are saying that we should be able to get abortions after the babies are born? Now, those aren't real people, or at the very least, it's not politicians, it's not legislators, it's not people that are in a capacity to make changes to change the way that the rules work. I'm not going to claim that a country filled with 350 million people doesn't have extremists in every single topic. That is absolutely a conversation that can be had. It's a waste of time because, again, much like the talk yesterday, every population of people is going to have people that think violence is the answer. They're going to take the extremist position on anything. And that's not right wing. That's not left wing. That's not independent. That's not male. That's not female. That's everybody. Okay. So I'm not saying that there isn't some random person in America that thinks that abortion should be legal through the first 2 years of the child's birth. Nobody serious is actually proposing that. Here's the difference. I'm gonna exaggerate this for the purposes of the video going up on YouTube. If you kill a baby from embryo on up with a pill or a scalpel, we ought to execute you. That is not some random virgin on Twitter. That is not some billionaire with overtly Puritan beliefs. That is not some TV televangelist who's out there specifically to milk some people looking for answers of their last dollar that they've been able to save during the cost of living crisis. That is one of the Republican frontrunners, Monty Fritz, currently a House of Representatives member who is running for governor of the state. There is an amendment to House Bill 570, Senate Bill 738, was filed by primary sponsors Representative Jody Barrett and Representative Mark Pody of Tennessee. You'll never guess which political party. Co-sponsored by 5 of their colleagues. You'll never guess which political party. All men, including Representative Monty Fritz. He is the source of the quote, "If you kill a baby from embryo on up with a pill or a scalpel, we ought to execute you." He spoke those words at a meeting in Jonesboro. This is according to Tennessee Repro News. It's where publisher Rachel Wells last year interviewed a pregnant woman who was allegedly denied prenatal care under Tennessee's Medical Ethics Defense Act because she was unmarried to her partner of 15 years. Yeah, please, I dare you, send me angry text messages that I called you Puritans right there. 920-281-1150. Let's see how that goes. This is a real piece of legislation that is only getting traction because of this country's attitude towards women, specifically exemplified by a certain political party that gets mad when you highlight it. I don't understand how this person even exists in the political sphere, because this is some 1850s, like for those of you listening to this show that weren't necessarily on board since the beginning, after the Republican Supreme Court got rid of Roe v. Wade, you know, a thing they said they would never do and that people were just being alarmist. After they got rid of Roe v. Wade, Wisconsin reverted back to an 1849 abortion bill that our state GOP refused to remove until we reworked the maps and kind of showed, oh yeah, bad things are going to happen to your party if you don't start to toe some kind of more centrist line. Then the liberals in the Supreme Court ended up rolling back that 1849 abortion ban because, can't stress enough, in 1849 women couldn't vote. I'm sure Republicans will do fine in this Supreme Court race coming up in April. I have high hopes for them based on the way they've been acting lately. I got a good feeling for them these days. This is a conversation that is currently being had by a front runner for governor. Now, for the record, Tennessee has some of the most strict abortion rules in America in a post-Roe America. And I only have 7 listeners in Tennessee, and I recognize that there is a cost conversation that goes into moving. But if you are statistically, it feels like 80% of my audience is women based on the last ratings book I got. If you are listening to this in the state of Tennessee and you are a woman, may I suggest leaving? If you find yourself with the economic capacity to do so. I do not want to be insensitive to people that I understand that there is a cost. Hell, if I weren't in the position I were in, getting from Pittsburgh to Appleton was a pretty expensive endeavor. Including security deposits needed, moving costs. For the real OGs, if you remember correctly, the company that was my moving company actually held all my stuff hostage and tried to charge me double what we agreed upon. It was a whole thing. I understand that there is a cost associated with that. But see, this gets at a larger issue. The conversation about the women's hockey team sucks, and it's a shame that we have to have it. It's a shame that we have a president willing to act that way. It's a shame that the men's hockey team didn't stand up for the women's hockey team in a more full-throated manner. And let's be real, there's absolutely an element of hockey being the white sport. Like, let's just call it what it is. There's a reason why the hockey was focused on in this scenario. Like, no one's talking about that element of it, but I promise you, I'm not wrong. But all of that is trivial. At the end of the day, those women are gold medal athletes. At the end of the day, those women do have the respect of every man that actually respects women. What they accomplished was impressive, and even though some 80-year-old orange jerk decided to minimize what they've done, it doesn't take away from what they've done. And even though it's frustrating, always having to be the bigger person, the bigger women in these kind of scenarios, having to show up to work the next day and act like none of that's happening. Trust me, I am sympathetic to it. Nothing's ever going to take away from that. But it's when that attitude is exemplified in legislation by powerful people, potentially en route to becoming significantly more powerful, that is when the women's hockey team conversation is extrapolated in a way that is like, oh wow, if we ignore the small things, the mocking of athletes that have accomplished more than most people listening to my voice, including myself, could hope to accomplish before turning 40. If we can reconcile the fact that one of the most powerful men on the planet is willing to talk about them that way, it shouldn't come as a shock then that this over the top legislation is being proposed. Again, anytime I say that Republicans are the extremist on abortions, inevitably I get some comments about some random Twitter person saying that we need to expand abortion rights. And then this goes directly under the radar, and nobody has anything to say about it, specifically coming from the GOP side. This is disgusting. This should be shot down, and this is a terrifying reality. I thought abortion rights were done, like, you know what I mean, in terms of being a politically viable issue. I thought we were moving on because the states that are normal states are being like, oh no, women are obviously humans and deserve access to health care. And then there's the women are property states like Tennessee that are going to handle this accordingly, but I didn't know it would still be on the ballot. This is making it very clear to me that if Republicans get comfortable, they are absolutely willing to implement a death penalty for the audacity of having an abortion. Not my opinion, exhibited in empirical fact. What else are we talking about here? Hello, we're on Outside the Box.
Morning, Ben.
Hey, Dave, what's up?
You got to remember from Trump, everything, even all of his cabinet members were picked from Fox News. Everything has to be typecast, all right?
Sure.
Even the men, they have to be beautiful.
Yeah, it's
okay,
stupid.
Getting to beauty. He owned Miss USA, Miss Universe, Miss Teen USA for, I don't know, multiple decades maybe. That's his mentality. Everything with women has to be appearance. Look at all of his beef with Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh, sure.
And calling reporters, the CNN anchor, piggy and all of that stuff. And you don't smile and all of this. It's his mentality. Everything has to be a beauty pageant.
No, it's disgusting, and it's from a bygone era, but unfortunately he knows. It's kind of like I say about when people call Trump racist. I genuinely believe that Donald Trump is not racist, but I believe he knows a large percentage of his base are and appreciate hearing racist things, so he says and does racist things. I think the same thing is true with his sexist comments. He knows that there is an element out there that enjoys hearing women belong in the kitchen. Hell, you just mentioned Pete Hegseth, and I'm going to let you go, Dave. But Pete Hegseth is marching around some pastor that thinks women shouldn't have the right to vote, and there's an alarming number of people willing to go along with that sentiment. I don't understand it. I'm never going to understand it. But there's people that want to hear it. We got a couple of texts I'm going to run through here, and then we're going to move on. KG says most of the U.S. gold medals were won by women. I'm disappointed the men's hockey team didn't speak up for their Olympic teammates. I agree. I mean, there's definitely an element of that for sure. But again, there's a racial element to this that nobody wants to talk about. But it's in there as well. Ernie simply says, we have a fool for a president scumbag. I was never like that. Proud to say it. Right on, man. Definitely an enlightened way to think. Ben says, so now you agree of the importance of women's sports. You must now like Riley Gaines. My daughter lost to a boy in an all-girls track meet. Either acknowledge it or lose credibility. I've already acknowledged, Ben, since you've known me. I played men's volleyball for 4 years in high school. When I was 15 years old in ninth grade, I was 6'2". We were bad. In 4 years, we didn't win 10 matches. And in an effort to embarrass us my sophomore year, our coach had us play the women's junior Olympic team, all of the best women in Pennsylvania on one team. Here's the problem with that. I was 6'2" when I was technically when I was 14 years old, but when I started freshman year, I was 6'2". A net for men's is 8'3". A net for women's volleyball is 7'6". I could block shots without jumping. I have stated unequivocally that while I do believe the transgender community deserves acceptance and should be included in society, I struggle with the concept of men's and women's sports. Am I a big enough dummy to vote based on that? To vote to cut social spending programs in the name of 7 athletes? No, of course not. It's why I'm not Waka Waka MAGA. But I have been very vocal about this since the beginning. Riley Gaines is a talentless dumbass that is using this trans rhetoric in order to grift people like yourself into making countless money and voting to give your rights away. But I do struggle with the concept of transgender people playing in the sports that they identify with, because I watched us completely demolish the team, and we were pretty trash in terms of what men's volleyball is. David just says, wow, you're on a roll this morning. Apparently, you've never been to Tennessee. I was one time. That was in my pre-political era. Kristen says, do you know how many women know that Trump is a predator outside of his past statements, past behaviors, mountains of accusations, etc.? Look at how he responded when the Supreme Court told him no. It's not a bygone era, though. That team of young hockey players laughed. Yeah, I cannot explain it away. It's a shame, and it's very disappointing. I understand in the moment, sometimes when a president is talking to you, like if Trump were in front of me right now, I don't know how I'd react, because you don't expect to be in that moment. I'm not saying that I would justify some kind of racist or sexist behavior, but I get your point there, Kristen. It's not lost on me. Joe says, I think all your listeners need to go to Wikipedia and look up the Heritage Foundation. No doubt. The Heritage Foundation, the far-right think tank that found that there are 0 examples of voter fraud coming from undocumented immigrants. Or, excuse me, 33 examples between 1982 and today. That's why it's so important that we completely upend the process. And Kathleen says, if Trump isn't racist, then how do you explain how he handled the Central Park 5? Look, I'm not saying that he's not prejudiced, but I'm saying for every example you have, there is a video of him on the Wendy Williams show, well before he ever had presidential aspirations, or at least well before he ran. And he's up there listening to a black woman talking about dating a man for 9 years who hasn't popped the question. And look it up. Like, you listen to the way he talks to her with such sincerity, and it actually ticks me off, because if that guy were president, I think there would be a lot less animosity, but he knows that there's a lot more money to be made in being a jerk to different races and genders than there is being polite to them, at least as it stands right now, which is genuinely unfortunate. DSL says it's disappointing Trump didn't do it equally, but let's be honest, women's sports are just not as popular. If they were, the vast majority of women's sports leagues would not be subsidized by men's sports profits. Doesn't change the fact he could make a 5-minute phone call, though. You're exactly right. These women's leagues are still trying to build up the economic element of what their sports are doing, which is going to take time, but I think they're on a good trajectory. But it doesn't change the fact that a simple phone call, you know as well as I do that Joe Biden would have called both. That's it there. We're going to switch gears when we come back. We're going to jump into this conversation about minimum wage and cost of living right here in the Fox Valley. Hopefully, Tim Roush is listening. He's actually going to chime in on this one as well. He called me off the air. I told him to call back. We will do that on the other side of the break. You'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices. You know, there's times when I feel like my words would be better spent just screaming into an Altoid container and throwing it off a cliff, because people just straight up don't hear the stuff I'm saying. Brian saying, every day I wake up and wonder how in the hell our country has got to where it is. We talk about dissing the women's hockey team instead of Social Security. We have to discuss Patel's flying on the U.S. dime instead of the Iran situation. Kristi Noem's commercials on self-deportation instead of prosecution of the ICE murderers, Epstein et al. Participants. I am so frustrated with our leadership, administration, and president. How can a person be be proud of anything we do right now? Which you bring up a lot of valid points there, Brian, and I do believe that's the way the system is designed. Like the reason why we're not having real conversations about Iran or Venezuela, for that matter, is because the Democratic Party knows damn well they'd be doing the exact same thing if they were in the position to be able to do so. So they can't necessarily. They're not. To paraphrase Danny Green, they're not who they want us to think they are. And so our media is more than happy to highlight the Kash Patel thing, mostly because there is video evidence of Kash Patel calling out Christopher Wray for doing the exact same thing. I think that's probably the most frustrating part about all of this, is that it's just like how during the first Trump presidency, the media would be like, look at this, from 6 in the morning until 11 in the morning, his calendar just says executive time. What kind of president has 5 hours where he has nothing on the books? And then cue the next 4 years where Joe Biden's just walking around clearly not knowing what year it is and not doing any kind of media appearances whatsoever. And we're just all being told, sit down, shut up. Something about January 6th. Please stop questioning whether or not Joe Biden is cognitively competent or not. And then flash forward to now, and we're back to how come the president's golfing all the time? And then conversely, 2 of those 3 times, MAGA supporters didn't care that the president is clearly only working half the day, and really, really cared for 4 years about whether or not the president was competent enough for the job. So we reward. We have a 2-party system that rewards loyalty, both within the party as well as in the media infrastructure. I say it all the time. I understand why people sell out. There are full-blown meet and greets, get-togethers, hobnobbing moments where influencers all get together and laugh about how successful they are doing their TikTok videos and all those things. I don't get invited to them because everybody knows that the second Democrats have control again, this isn't going to be some love fest or some kind of cover show for all the ways the Democratic Party is letting us down, which is who ultimately gets the benefit of it. Just like how some of the largest right-wing influencers on the planet, roughly a year ago, all got binders that said Epstein files, and they were walking around smirking, saying, we're finally going to get to the bottom of all this. Meanwhile, we now know that it was all a ruse because their whole existence is to cover for half of the political spectrum. Just like the way influencers who refused to acknowledge Biden's slipping cognitive abilities all got invited to the White House for photo meet and greets the last week that the Biden administration was in office. It's no different. It just only frustrates us half the time. So with that in mind, I see I have more texts and I will get the rest of them in, but I see I have a call coming through. I think I know who it is. The last 2 days, we have had conversations about the cost of living crisis, specifically here in the state of Wisconsin and in our counties specifically. Outside the Box airs terrestrially in Brown County and Outagamie County, a couple of others as well, but primarily in those 2. And in those 2 counties, almost 60,000 people are not making enough to pay for rent/mortgage, food, and utilities, and have health care. 60,000 people unable to do so in 2 counties that have a population of a little over 400,000. It's 15% of the population, and that doesn't even include the percentage of the population that can afford to cover those costs barely and is putting away $200 to $400 extra on top of that, and is just waiting for that random car noise to happen or that random healthcare bill to pop up or whatever the situation may be, and all of a sudden they will find themselves in that 60,000 number. There is a concerted effort to get the minimum wage increased. What people are looking for is the 20 to 22 range. What's funny is I remember graduating from college in 2010 and hearing the claims that we have to get the minimum wage up to $10 when it was $7.25. It is now 16 years later, and we're hearing that it needs to go up to $20 instead of $7.25, which is what it is in our state, Wisconsin. Now, I looked it up, and 1% of people are actually getting paid the $7.25. However, 21% of people, which is roughly 843,000 people, are making less than $15 an hour. Now, for some perspective, $15 an hour pre-tax is $31,200. That's before you get taxed. Thankfully, Donald Trump cut taxes for billionaires. That should trickle down on you guys any moment. But until then, $31,200 pre-tax is what 20%, 1 in 5, 21% actually, 1 in 5 people in our state are trying to figure out how to live on right now. And I'm just telling you right now, I don't know how that's feasible. If you have a child, if you have any kind, if you are sick, if you have a sick family member, no idea how you're actually making it work on those kind of wages. Now, I got a call off the air from Tim Roush, who actually sponsors the show. This isn't a planned call or anything like that, but I do know a lot about how Tim operates as a businessman, and he wanted to share his thoughts about the minimum wage and kind of eliminating the politicization surrounding this conversation. So let me just make sure here. Tim, is that you on the phone line right now?
Oh, you bet, brother.
Right on, man. So I'm just going to let you kind of take the floor here, because you and I talked a little bit off the air about this, but what are your thoughts when you hear these kind of numbers, when you hear about what people are going through and the struggles that people who are working 40 hours, who are doing the things we say should lend themselves to at least the basic staples of American life? What are your thoughts when you hear this kind of stuff?
Well, Ben, there's a lot to unpack here. And the first thing that comes to mind is it, like you said, it doesn't have to be a right or a left side on this. This is common sense. We have other states that have higher minimum wages. We can see what it's going to do. You know, this isn't necessarily going to make a hamburger unaffordable because, you know, those people are working for a minimum wage or make other services unaffordable. We can literally see what's going to happen when you study other states that have already raised it. It's embarrassing that we would wait this long. We can sit here and cry about inflation last year and the cost of everything, and then do nothing about raising the minimum wage. That's embarrassing. Not only that, but as a business owner, I understand. If you don't think this doesn't affect you, you're completely wrong. If we can raise the minimum wage to an affordable living wage, it affects the people that are just above it. It affects the people that are just above that. Every single one of you listening, it's going to affect you in a manner of maybe a little more windfall coming your way. So take notice, take interest in the subject and talk about it. It's a real easy conversation to have. And just before I came on, you were talking, everything math, and this really does come down to math. If we're accepting a 10% tariff, what do you think the percentage to give somebody minimum wage is going to be? I'm going to guess maybe 3%, 4%. Now, just a second. You're willing to take a 10% tariff or higher, but you're not willing to help people afford their rent. And by the way, I'm a landlord too. And by the way, I've got a place that I've got 4 family members living in a home to make the rent for me. And they're all living, near that minimum wage area. And they're all working their butt off to do it. And it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, Tim, and that's why I appreciated your input on it, because as you mentioned, you are a business owner, you are a landlord. These are things that I also, I don't run a business, but I work for myself to a certain extent with the expansion of the show audience here, and I also am a landlord. And you haven't raised your rates, neither have I, in years. And I know this about you because I know you on a personal level. When you hear these kind of stories, I just think it carries a lot more weight, because oftentimes people will say, well, if you're not making $15 an hour, that means you're not doing real work. Whereas I know, all work is real work. You going to get a coffee in the morning, it didn't pour itself if you go somewhere to get it. Whatever the situation is, it contributes to your process, your well-being, and kind of how your life kind of functions here. And we got to look at it as a team effort if we're going to make this work. So, I mean, I appreciate the sentiment, and I think you make a ton of good points. And I didn't even consider the tariff element to it, but I think that was a fantastic point to make as well. So anything to say before I let you go?
Yeah, I just don't want people to be afraid of having the conversation. That's really what it is. And don't be bullied by scare tactics. I mean, let's use real life facts to talk about this. And we've got plenty of other areas that we can look at it. You know, did the McDonald's in their area close down because they had to raise the wage for the employees? I don't think it did.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, that's really what we need. Look at the areas that have increased, see how it had affected them, and have those discussions instead of, you know, fake ones where, oh, you're not going to be able to afford this or that, or how does that work, you know? And like I said, it affects everybody, and everybody should be having this conversation, from the top earners to the middle earners to the bottom earners. This isn't just about raising the wage for somebody at the very bottom and you don't give a darn. This is about their wage going up, and it does affect you because you might pay a little more for that service, but you too might get a raise out of this too.
Exactly. Hey, Tim, I appreciate the call, man. You take it easy.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you. And to his point, the minimum wage for working in McDonald's in Denmark is $22 an hour, and the cost of a Big Mac is 15 cents more than what we pay here in America. So it turns out that keeping McDonald's employees' wages artificially lower is not doing anything to make our burgers less expensive. I am not, for the record, I have not had 5 fast food burgers in my entire life. I am not really a fast food outside of the breakfast. Every now and again, I really don't partake in fast food dining. I've never really been a fast food person, but I do know, just for the purposes of researching this show, that the wages are way lower here than they are anywhere in Europe, and yet they still are raising our prices all the time. The dollar menu went away, not because we raised wages, but because McDonald's wanted to make unlimited profits instead of just most of the profits. And this is borne out time and time again. And spoiler warning, ladies and gentlemen, once AI gets good enough to do the job at McDonald's, it's not going to matter how much you agree to take. They're going to eliminate the positions. Traveling abroad in January and the beginning of February, there were quite a few McDonald's that I came across at airports and things like that, where there's just a kiosk. You punch all your food into the kiosk, and then they just have people grabbing food. It's only a matter of time before there's machines. It's like, oh, he ordered a medium fry and this burger, and it squirts the appropriate proportion of the different sauces that go on there, and it fills the fries into a specific size, and then all the people are going to be gone anyway. And it's always held over our head that you're going to eliminate these positions by asking for a living wage. I'm here to tell you right now, they are going to eliminate your positions regardless. And if you think I'm lying, look at the number of layoffs that took place just in the first year of the Trump presidency from companies that were experiencing record profits. Meanwhile, the GOP cut their bleeping taxes. I was of the impression that was supposed to increase wages, decrease costs, increase the number of jobs that are available. No, they took it as an opportunity to lay people off and pad their pockets. There comes a time, I posted a picture to my Facebook page that is just a big fat guy in a suit. Essentially, it says poverty exists not because we can't feed the poor, but because we can't satisfy the rich. And literally, the first comment I got was some GOP boomer saying maybe it's because we give the poor too much free stuff and they just keep taking more. Who's your baby's daddy? Who cares? I don't know why this guy that I promise you isn't making $1 million a year, let alone $1 billion, probably isn't making $100,000 a year, insists on defending billionaires that hate him so much. Meanwhile, as I have highlighted 1,000 times over on this show, we created Social Security. We created Medicare. We created Medicaid. We built the infrastructure system that connects all of the states. We built entire neighborhoods and just gave homes away. All of this subsidized by the government. We did not develop a debt or deficit because we were taxing billionaires at a commensurate rate. You know when we did blow a hole in the debt and deficit? When we cut billionaires' taxes, and thank goodness George W. showed up and said, why don't we fight two never-ending wars? Don't call me stupid. We got one call, and then we got to get to break here before the top of the hour. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, good morning, Ben. Gary calling. Say, when I was in high school, I worked for minimum wage when I started out, and I was earning 85 cents an hour. And, in less than a year, I was up to 135 an hour minimum wage.
Sure.
That was probably that was under Kennedy, by the way.
That's like a 70% increase in 1 year into the pay you're taking home.
Yeah, I thought I was terrific.
Yeah.
But anyway, one thing I just wanted to mention too is, businesses get reimbursed for business mileage. There's a rate for that. I don't recall what it is, maybe 50 cents a mile or whatever. Anyway, I just looked up about volunteer hours, what the value is, and it varies by state. You can't deduct it from your taxes as a business or as an individual, but you can use it to calculate the value of volunteer time at an organization. And in Wisconsin, it's around $31.89 per hour, which is far in excess of $20 an hour. Now, that's on average. So when you have Habitat for Humanity or somebody and, a business excuses their worker, they can probably use that as a grant writing dollar amount on how many volunteer hours people put in to service their group. But I looked it up too. In California, of course, is over $50 an hour. But that gives you some perspective of how that relates to $7.25 an hour and $20 an hour for minimum wage. Now, again, that's an average of $31.89 in Wisconsin for volunteer hours. But it does reflect what the federal government considers the value of human labor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And as Larry out in North Carolina highlights, when you were working for the minimum wage that you were highlighting there, you could buy an ounce of gold after 1 week of work. Now it takes you 22 weeks. That's almost half of the year in order to acquire the same amount. And I appreciate the call, Gary. I'm going to have to let you go there. And I actually did the math in terms of just a straight percentage element. Now, I realize there's inflation factors and other factors that go in. But to get that roughly 70% increase in 1 year, that would be the equivalent of paying somebody today, if the minimum wage from 1 year to the next went from $7.25 to $12.32 per hour. This is the kind of thing that certain people from previous generations want to ignore. There has never, in the creation of the minimum wage, there has never been a stretch where we have not increased it longer than the one that we are experiencing right now, that happens to coincide with essentially my entire adult life. Last time we increased the minimum wage was 2009. I got out of college in 2010. I have not seen the minimum wage go up since graduating from college. That's never even come close to happening before. We have to get to break. We can keep this conversation rolling on the other side, though. We have texts piling up. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and the Political Voices Network. All right, we're back. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box, WHBY, Political Voices Network, Outside the Box, as per usual, brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company Appleton, Wisconsin depends on. And shout out to Tim for calling into the program to talk minimum wage. I think it means a lot when local business owners are talking about that kind of thing. Obviously, not something that pertains to him specifically. He understands the game, understands the way things work. A lot of his employees are his way that company. But, definitely a problem for a lot of the people in Fox Valley. Again, over 800,000 people, the exact number being, what is it here? 834,000 people. Again, we don't have a population of 6 million. 21% of the entire population is working for under $50 an hour, which I've done the math. That is $31,200 a year before you end up getting taxed, and we're supposed to pretend that that's a livable wage. Moreover, and I see Anna texting kind of a similar attitude here. I actually just read her text, far be it for me to steal stuff that other people are saying. Conservatives are getting close to the point, but just keep missing it. Yes, these programs should not be widespread, but in order to stop helping people eat, the solution shouldn't be to stop feeding them, it's to be empowering them to the companies that pay less than a living wage are held accountable for the poverty that they are creating. And that's exactly right. 20% of the workforce at Walmart currently is on food stamps, the same food stamps that the Trump administration cut in order to fund a masked Virgin Army known as the Gestapo ICE, brutalizing Americans in the street every single day. Where are we getting this extra funding? By cutting people's access to food stamps and Medicaid. This was oftentimes a problem that I would express during the Biden administration. And I would say people like me feel stuck because I know the Republican Party isn't going to show up and say, okay, we're not going to send money to Ukraine anymore. We're going to strengthen healthcare options and SNAP benefits for working class Americans that are just trying to get by. I knew damn well that was never going to come with the pro billionaire MAGA movement. But as somebody who knows that the alternative was Kamala Harris, who in fact would ship our tax dollars off to Ukraine and Israel and still not do anything about SNAP benefits or Medicaid or making sure that Social Security is solvent for, God forbid, my generation, you all of a sudden find yourself pigeonholed into a two-party system that is just straight up not working for you, especially if you are under the age of 45. And Anna gets it. Anna gets that by cutting Walmart taxes, that's not all of a sudden going to make them pay more for their employees so that we do not have to subsidize their SNAP benefits. We're going to give them this massive tax cut, and we're going to apply our tax dollars to feeding Walmart's employees. And for some reason, it's only the dumbest people in the audience, but for some reason, you guys get mad at the people working at Walmart for that. And I'll never understand why you guys get lost in the sauce in such an obvious conversation to have. Again, the minimum wage hasn't increased since 2009. I have been technically I've been working much longer than when I graduated college, but I have not been educating myself since 2010. So the entire time that I have been in the workforce, we have never seen a minimum wage increase. That has never happened for that long of a period of time since the creation of the minimum wage. And yet the boomers who benefited from a constantly increasing minimum wage don't seem to realize the lack of benefits from a no longer increasing minimum wage. And I have to drag some of these people kicking and screaming into the future, despite the fact that it seems like they get confused pretty easily. If you can't tell, it's a frustrating reality that I have to deal with. And again, one right winger commented on my Facebook / Twitter post and says, I am tired of a permanent welfare state. He is looking for people to here. I'd ask Democrats what's the plan, or Mamdani also has plan for homeowners. Plus, I personally think welfare recipients need to be reevaluated every year because those programs only keep people in the poverty class, and that's the only way to get welfare. That's a real conversation to be had. I would love to have that kind of conversation. Unfortunately, the way Republicans have decided to handle it is just cutting the benefits for working Americans that are not making enough to feed themselves and their families despite working 40 hours a week. So if you believe that, that's fine. Then it's time to start electing leaders that look at it that way. I use this as an example all the time. In Denmark, they just built homes and gave them to the homeless people in Denmark. Most of the homeless people that were in those homes were not there for even 2 years, because it's not like they were mansions. It's not like they were getting set up in the lap of luxury on the taxpayer's dime. These were one-room buildings that provided shelter from the elements and a place to clean yourself while you were looking to reintegrate into society. 87% of the people that found themselves in those homes were ready to re-enter the workforce and start contributing to society. In America, and this is a Democratic problem, they will create a welfare program, tell you, we're going to help you pay for your rent, but only if you make less than $24,000 a year. So you find somebody working for $10 an hour, takes home whatever that is. Let's say it's less than 24,000. Then all of a sudden they get that raise to $15 an hour. So they're making $31,000, $200 a year before taxes. It's going to knock them down even further than that from there. And then they're going to lose several $1,000s in renter's assistance, not to mention possible food stamp assistance, possible healthcare assistance, whatever the situation may be. Now, all of a sudden, a raise from $24,000 a year to $31,200 a year is actually a reduction in pay, because while that is still not enough money to afford the basics in life, a liberal government will tell you you are now doing well enough to exist. And for some reason, MAGAs will absolutely be cool with cutting Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos' taxes. But the idea that these people are receiving welfare, oh, it just makes me so mad. And around and around and around we go, while nothing actually gets addressed. And now we have to focus on the Gestapo instead of addressing the cost of living crisis. Thanks a lot, MAGA. We got a call coming in. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hi, Ben. Pete from Schwaben here.
Yeah.
Quick question for you about the minimum wage. Would you be open to keeping the minimum wage for 16 to 18-year-olds and increasing it for everyone else?
Yeah, I think that at the very least is a jump off in the right direction, because I know, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, the refrain was often, these jobs aren't meant for adults to get livelihoods. These are meant for kids that are working in high school. And my comment would always be, are they open during school hours? And inevitably that answer would be yes. It's like, okay, well then it's not just for children to be working there then.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's at least a good start for sure. And there's a lot that needs to go into it. A company in northern Wisconsin, I don't think is going to be able to pay $20 an hour, but the cost of living in northern Wisconsin reflects that reality. And so I don't know that there's a one size fits all number to this either.
Right. Now the 16-year-old would argue, hey, I'm trying to save to go to university. Now that's a valid argument
for sure.
But the I was influenced by an older economist who is long dead. I won't mention his name, but he argued increasing of the minimum wage leads to youth unemployment, because an employer will say a 16 or a 17-year-old really has very little appreciable skills, and in essence, I would be better to hire a 22, 23-year-old who has some work experience, pay them more, but I know the productivity, and again, I know everything is nuanced with what you're doing and all the other things, but he had argued increasing the unemployment could lead to higher unemployment rates among the youth, and that's why I was looking at more of a gradual type increase. But thanks very much, Ben.
I appreciate the call, Pete. Thanks for chiming in as per usual. And I agree with a lot of what he's saying. And again, I understand it from a business standpoint as well. But then that begs a larger question, right? Like you're talking to a guy. I used to bartend. Bartenders, they made a little more than waiters. Waiters would make $2.83 per hour plus tips for working at a restaurant. Bartenders make the big bucks, at least in Western PA. I was getting $4.50 per hour plus making tips on top of that. And when you bring up the idea to restaurant owners of paying a minimum wage, they say if I had to pay everybody $12 an hour for existing there, this business would go under immediately because my food prices would reflect that. And if you're a regular listener, you've heard me say this before. If you're new to the program, no matter what line of work you're talking about, it always seems like that's the refrain, which means one of two things. Either people are lying about their bottom line, which, having worked at a family-run business, I know exactly how tight the margins are in terms of locally owned businesses. I'm not going to speak the same for the national food chains and things of that nature. I'm talking specifically in the tipped industry. Or B, then we have an entire economy that is precipitously built on underpaying the overwhelming majority of people that work in those lines of work. Again, if you're just getting to know me, I was part of the unionization effort in Odyssey, Pittsburgh for producers. During my tenure there, we went from being non-union affiliated to joining SAG-AFTRA. When we were non-union affiliated, we were getting $8 an hour, not minimum wage, but $8 an hour for a job that requires a college degree and skills that are acquired in college and a capacity to do a job that not everybody can do. And if you were married, you did not get access to health care for your spouse. After unionizing, we got a bump to brace for it, $12 an hour, and spouses were included on the health care. Meanwhile, the on-air talent, who not to knock anybody, they have many more years experience than I had in the industry, but I'm just going to be real with you. I was privy to ratings meetings working as a producer. Ain't nobody doing what I'm doing here in a smaller market, all right? And they were all clearing six figures just for existing. Now, far be it for me to be counting other people's money. However, if you're going to get paid six figures for mediocrity, you probably shouldn't expect the people keeping the product on the air to be satisfied with essentially a minimum wage payment for a college-educated job. Every industry has this conversation, and it's a very real problem that can't be ignored. And I don't want it to sound like I am implying this is a one-size-fits-all approach. But the fact of the matter is, McDonald's profits in 2025 were roughly $8.56 billion. That's a 4% increase from 2024. And they are paying people in other countries upwards of $20 an hour to work there. And they are still clearing $8.56 billion in profits. All right? How much of that is getting funneled into stock buybacks? Probably most of it. So this conversation shouldn't have to be happening in 2026, especially as we are watching wealth inequality grow to a record level, not just in America, but in recorded human history when people actually know what the wealth disparity was. Again, we have surpassed the Gilded Age. We have surpassed 1790s France. We are hitting all-time levels here that have never been seen, and it's happening at a time when the American workforce is more productive than it has ever been. And I think that's a very important distinction to make. Now, I have a ton of text messages that have been piling up throughout the show here. I have a willing to believe that some of these are probably not as relevant as when you sent them, and I apologize. I've been on a little bit of a tear this show. Jerry says IRS mileage reimbursement rate is now 72.5 cents per mile for businesses. He also says during my 4 years in college, the federal minimum wage was increased twice. thank you for being level-headed, Jerry, in your analysis of what was going on in it at that time period. Anna says there are plenty of restaurants who now pay their people and they are thriving. Exactly. There's plenty of examples of that taking place. Not every restaurant is in that position, but I'll tell you right now, the one that I was working at absolutely would have been able to do it. Ben says my Big Mac combo has gone from $3 to $12. Exactly, Ben. Enter corporate greed, because the minimum wage rate has not gone up in this country. So why has the cost of the burgers gone up? Exactly. Those are the kind of questions that you should be asking. I'd like to think you are asking them, but there's a certain political party that is absolutely not going to ask them. Realistically, there's a certain age bracket that per capita isn't going to ask them, and it's the most welfare recipient age bracket that is out there, which is probably why I get so frustrated in talking about these conversations. It's an unfortunate reality that so many people have to deal with. And just to be clear, I haven't worked for minimum wage in 16 years. I wish I used my platform to advocate for things that would directly benefit me personally. But as Tim pointed out during the 9:30 hour, an increase to the minimum wage, the increase to the minimum wage makes everybody's wages in turn go up, just like unionizing makes everybody's wages go up even when you're not unionized. And that's what oftentimes gets lost, and that's why it is vilified by the individuals representing big business, which is an important distinction to make there. I started laughing because Anna just simply said the quality of the burger didn't go up, LOL, which, yes, exactly. It ain't the quality. Realistically, I can't say the word on the air. There's an author I'm trying to interview on the show, and I'm gonna censor the name of the book. It's called Encrapification, but crap isn't the word that's used. And it's essentially that if you've noticed, most things in life are getting worse. And I don't mean that from an old guy shaking his hands at the cloud perspective. I mean, it's a tangible reality. Like, stuff that you remember as better is not as good as it once was. And that includes fast food burgers. And there's a reason for that. And it's because consolidation has impacted our society so much that people know you really don't have anywhere else to turn at this point. The fact of the matter is, and this is what people reconcile or have trouble reconciling with, a company the size of McDonald's should not exist. And I'm picking on McDonald's right now. Insert any major corporation here. I'm extra mad at them because they're gentrifying Thailand, and I was watching it happen when I went to go visit there last month. A company as big as McDonald's should not exist. The only way that you become a worldwide phenomenon like them is by A, exploiting your worker base, and B, exploiting your customer base. So they're gradually making their products worse and worse while charging more and more and not increasing their wages. And then somehow convincing 40% of the population, blaming the people working there for what the higher ups at McDonald's are doing. It's an unfortunate thing that people have to deal with, but it's a reality nevertheless. We got a call. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, how's it going, Ben?
All right, Jim, how you doing?
Good show, Ben. I'm looking forward to the State of the Union, and I'm going to go before it and after it. I'm going to call it Real News Fake President, and we'll let it go at that. Have a good day, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Jim. I think that's his first call since going on Political Voices Network. That's Trucker Jim. He calls in. He's the fastest hanger-upper in the Midwest. The second he makes his point, he's off the phone. There's no back and forth. But I definitely appreciate when he calls nevertheless. And by the way, shout out to the people who've been taking part in that program as well. If you haven't heard me talking about it, the show is videoed. It goes live at 1 p.m. all days except for Tuesdays, where it goes live at 2 p.m. I definitely appreciate the people who've been leaving comments under the videos and have jumped on board as we're trying to grow something new on that network, which is very exciting for me personally. So thank you very much to everybody who's been commenting and taking part. With that, I think we're going to put this minimum wage conversation to bed. What's funny is I was only planning a brief conversation about it, and it turned into an hour. If you're new here, welcome to the Outside the Box process. But we are going to pivot. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about. I think we're going to go into the world of AI, but we're going to see. I'm going to parse through my rundown here and kind of pick and choose which stories I kind of want to squeeze into the last 20 minutes of the show. So it's a mystery till I come back. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on Outside the Box and Political Voices Network. You know, there's an ICE whistleblower who testified to Congress yesterday, essentially saying that they were encouraged to violate the Constitution in their efforts while rounding up Americans and crying anytime you compared them to the Gestapo. I'm probably not going to have time to get into it today, which is very disappointing, but I absolutely am going to tear ICE apart tomorrow, and I apologize because the cost of living crisis is something that hits very close to home for me because like I oftentimes mention, I really I've lived a life that hasn't lent itself. I don't want to call them mistakes. Some of them would be, but like I don't have children, like not unplanned children, not planned children. I've never been arrested. Not saying I've never broken the law. I'm saying I've never been arrested. I started my career and then switched careers, and that kind of set me back a little bit. But by and large, I lived a relatively mistake-free adult life. I don't have any addictions, no crippling expenditures that would make it difficult for me to be able to save money. And I can state unequivocally that my life could go topsy-turvy very quickly despite having nothing going against me. I don't have a mouth I need to feed. I don't struggle finding employment because we have a prison system that is absolutely designed to create a cyclical nature for the people that find themselves ensnared for it, particularly Black people. Like I am self-aware enough to kind of acknowledge these things. And it's so disheartening to me with how many people are out there who find themselves into one of these categories that I'm talking about here that really aren't seeing the kind of change that they need necessary. Like for some perspective, and I know I said I was done with this, but I have a problem. At the end of 2025, there were 4,000 data centers. Can't stress enough, it's one of the only bipartisan things that we can agree on right now is nobody wants data centers. There are 3,000 more planned or under construction. We have concentration camps. Did I say concentration camps? I meant happy camps. We have happy camps being built all over this nation. Fun fact, just to engage in a little bit of Schadenfreude, the people of Florida put up $600 million for Alligator Auschwitz to be constructed with the promise that Donald Trump and the federal government was going to pay them back. And now there is a lawsuit from federal attorneys saying that the federal government doesn't owe them that money. And there's a chance the people of Florida will be on the hook for $600 million, which is just chef's kiss. Absolutely fantastic. And I hope this hurts every single person in that state in some kind of economic way. I genuinely hope that happens. But you've got the happy camps being built. You've got the data centers being built. Stuff that nobody or only racists are asking for. Meanwhile, we have no solar farms being built anywhere because something about public land. We've got no public transit being built anywhere, and that to a certain extent falls at the feet of Democratic states as well, because you have an opportunity to show that these could be beneficial, and a lot of you are dropping the ball. I can tell you Colorado has a hell of a train system set up for the moment that you get off of any airplane. Absolutely beautiful. Hated how convenient it was. Everybody was super polite. It wasn't very loud or noisy or dirty. Like it was just a miserable experience. We probably should give more money to Raytheon. We're not getting new hospitals. We're actually watching hospital deserts become a much more prevalent reality than extra hospitals being built. We can't build houses for the homeless. We can't do any of these things, but we can build data centers and we can build concentration or happy camps, because that goes into the pockets of private prisons. That goes into the pockets of major tech companies that have bought both political parties. Fun fact, there is a political run coming from politicians, a new group being put together that is designed, that is built to examine whether or not data centers are doing the right things, whether they are investing in spying on American populations versus actually beneficial movements to make. This is the democratic effort to determine whether or not AI data centers are doing the right things. We have Josh Gottenheimer, we have Ted Lieu, and we have Valerie Foushee on this Democratic AI task force. Again, I have no faith MAGA is going to do anything other than the pro-billionaire thing. They've given me no reason to believe they would do anything other than the pro-billionaire thing. Get mad about it somewhere else, not my fault based on how they operate. Fact of the matter is, Josh Gottenheimer took $300,000 from AI's safety super PAC, one of the two that has $65 million invested in making sure that they can get pro-AI representatives and senators into Congress to make sure that data center bills get passed without much frustration. Again, people are waking up to just how much of a winnable issue this is, but is winning a seat more important to you than hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of AI money being funneled into you and hoping that Donald Trump and the Gestapo are enough of a fear factor to get you in office? Again, MAGA, this is your fault that Democrats are able to hide behind this, but nevertheless, that's a very real thing that people need to consider. Valerie Foushee is also accepting money as well. We do not, that's both of those are as per the failing New York Times. Occasionally they do something correct. How about that? But Ted Lieu, we do not know whether or not he is actually has accepted money yet or not. We will continue learning more and following along as the journalists in charge are willing to do so. But the fact is, they create a group to monitor AI structures being built in the implementation of different AI agents and all these different factors. And then it turns out 2/3 of the people on the Democratic task force are in fact paid by AI super PACs. I'm sure we will get nothing but the best information coming from those people going forward, right? Of course, right. Sound like Yenta the matchmaker there. This is exactly how our two-party system works, right? Because what Donald Trump is doing is objectively terrible. Everything is worse other than the actual security of the southern border, and that is at the expense of Americans being shot in the face. Everything is worse under the Trump administration. So a milquetoast liberal might be able to pull something off here. The fact that these individuals are willing to take money from the AI super PACs while being on the specially designated task force to monitor whether or not AI is behaving appropriately, the reason those people can hide behind that is because they'll go up and say, we're going to eliminate this Gestapo force that's murdering Americans in the street. And most level-headed people, again, ICE has a less than 30% approval rating. The economy has a barely 30% approval rating. Immigration tactics in general do not have a 30% approval rating. Tariffs have a barely 30% approval rating. There are a large percentage of independents that are like, you know what, liberals are obnoxious, but I am not dealing with fascism in America, so we're going a different route. Meanwhile, they're going to unintentionally end up voting for techno-fascism or Christian fascism if you're in Tennessee, where you can be put to death for having an abortion. Where do we turn? Where do we turn? If you're somebody that wants to see homeless encampments built instead of data centers, if you're somebody that wants to see student debt forgiven instead of building concentration camps, I mean happy camps, if you're somebody that wants to see these kind of things happen, where do you turn? It's most certainly not MAGA and whatever the hell this Gestapo crap they're doing is, but it certainly doesn't seem like liberals have intentions of doing this either. There is an article out right now in the failing New York Times. We're back to the New York Times sucking, saying it's an opinion article, to be fair, but of course, these are the only kind of opinions that the New York Times runs with, saying that Zoran Mamdani has to find a new way to govern. This is one of the only people who has been elected who has actually been coming through on his campaign promises. But Governor Hochul, a blue MAGA liberal, has come up and said, I, as governor, will not institute a wealth tax on billionaires. Governor Newsom, who, to be fair, can't do anything about it because it is a referendum for the people of California. So as long as it passes, it has to go through. But he has already gone through saying that a 2% tax increase on billionaires is about beyond the pale. It's too extremist for him to imagine doing something like that. And then this is being run in the New York Times as if that's the normal way to think. Quite literally, society is collapsing. Nobody can afford anything. And according to the New York Times, billionaires and their millionaire pundits that espouse their garbage rhetoric, the real crisis is that a handful of mayors and elected politicians might be holding billionaires to account for the first time in my 38 years of living. That's the real crisis that we all need to take into consideration. And I'm sorry, I'm just not buying it. Unless, of course, they're going to make me one of those millionaire pundits, in which case, why doesn't anyone want to work anymore, will be my logic. Until then, unfortunately, I think I am destined to hold these people to account in perpetuity, and there's nowhere to turn. So Governor Hochul, Kathy Hochul, who is guaranteed the nomination, says, I'm not going to tax billionaires more in the name of making life affordable for millions of people across the state. So Zoran Mamdani has to turn around and say that we're going to have to find other tax increases that we can do in order to be able to fund this legislation. And then the Republican Party attacks, says, see, the socialist has to raise your taxes. Meanwhile, it's because liberals, blue MAGA liberals, Bush-era Republicans, as I like to call them, are blocking any type of true transient change. It's the reason why liberals block Bernie Sanders. It's the reason they tried to get a guy who's accused 12 times over of sexual harassment the nomination to be mayor of New York, instead of the guy who said, maybe the country doing a genocide doesn't deserve our tax dollars, and maybe billionaires could afford to pay a little more. And only one of those people was vilified in liberal media. Not to mention the fact that Andrew Cuomo gets positive coverage now on Fox News. If that doesn't give the game away, if that doesn't show you the duopoly, you're too entrenched in the cult to see what's actually happening. You can continue listening, and I'll hold your hand and try to guide you to water, but something tells me you're never going to see it if after 3.5 years you haven't caught on to what's happening right now. Joe says, thank you so much, Ben, for speaking out and giving truthful information, also for giving an outlet to be heard. Absolutely. Cynthia, who lives in Florida, says, wait, what? I am a new Floridian and we all have to take a bite of this crap sandwich because too many of us are too evil or just didn't pay attention, like the Venezuelans and the Cubans who are being snatched up under ice. Exactly. DSL says, why don't they just ask AI, how can you have sustained energy without building data centers to find a way to survive? I'm telling you right now, I don't like the framing of this explicitly from energy uses, because I'm going to tell you right now, I am more scared from a surveillance standpoint, that we literally have people championing, and they want to use this to surveil us. At the end of the day, this is the next iteration of the Patriot Act. So that's why right-wingers per capita don't see this as big of a problem as leftists do, and liberals are kind of mum about it, just like the Patriot Act. When the Patriot Act was produced, it was conservatives saying, well, just don't commit any crimes and you don't need to worry about being spied on. And now it's those same conservatives saying, I can't believe the government's spying on us. If we could skip that 15 years of you guys being wrong about this and just jump to the point where you want to prevent this stuff from happening, boy, howdy, would that make my life a lot more straightforward. We have a call. You're going to have to go quick. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hi, this is Dale. Just wondering what you think about media bias. Do you think there's a liberal media bias in the mainstream media?
No,
show,
I think there's a bias in general. I don't. There is a liberal bias. I'll tell you what. There is a liberal bias. There is a conservative bias. There is no left-wing bias. It's why people like this show. They think I'm a centrist. I'm actually a leftist, but there is no leftist media. So people that talk like me tend to get silenced, I guess is the best way I can answer your question.
Okay. Just one more thing. I was talking to a local banker. I own a business in Apple, and I've called in a couple times, talking to a local banker saying we get the interest rates down on home loans have gone down under 6%. And he said, we got more business than we can handle. More home loans than we can handle. We're being real selective.
Yeah, you call in with this kind of rhetoric all the time, and I'm just going to tell you, it really doesn't match the overall trajectory of things. I don't know where you keep finding these people that are just selling homes to under 30-year-olds at record paces, but more power to them if they exist. But I will say I am skeptical.
Well, how about this? George W. Bush. Well, first Bill Clinton, bragged, or whatever you want to say, that homeownership was at an all-time high under his presidency. And then George W. Bush, he bragged about the same thing. So, I mean, homeownership. And then we had a problem in 2008-9 with the crisis because too many people got loans that should not have. But
I mean, I bought in 2016. I bought in 2016. My interest rate is under 3%, and I own a duplex in the heart of the city of Pittsburgh. I am surrounded by bars and restaurants and 3 walkable hospitals and 3 walkable grocery stores. And I bought for well under $200,000. And now if I turned around and sold, that was at the end of 2016. If I wanted to sell my property, I'd clear $350,000. Now that's great news for me, but that says if you're trying to enter this housing market like I was 10 short years ago, that has nothing to do with the housing market crash or any of that crap. This is a new thing brought about by artificially inflated prices of homes that just, if you're in the market, I'm good. I can sell my home and enter another home, and it's pretty straightforward. If you're not in this market, good bleeping luck,
Yeah, from my vantage point in business for 43, almost 44 years here in Appleton, and watching people buy homes in my business because I'm in insurance, but I think things are pretty good.
Did you think they were good under Joe Biden?
Sure.
Okay. Well, see, that's an acceptable
okay.
answer.
I think things were okay there too. I just didn't, think he was much of a president, mentally, but that's the way it goes.
Okay, well, I appreciate the call, Dale. I disagree with your assessment on the housing market, but that's the beauty of this. Everybody's allowed to have opinions, even wrong ones. I have to go to a quick commercial break before we wrap up. We will put a bow on this conversation on the other side. Everybody stay where you are. Outside the Box, WHBY, and Political Voices Network. All right, I don't have time. I don't have time to mess around. We went far too long. We went far too long in these segments, and I got to put a bow on this conversation. And all I'm going to do is read text messages because that last phone call, rather than having me address it, I'm just going to let everybody else address it. Anna says maybe he is only seeing people who buy houses, and then he believes that's a total sample size, which I do believe is part of the problem. When I do these segments saying 60% of people don't even have a spare set of tires worth of money, let alone a down payment on a house worth of money, that means 40% of people do. In a country with 350 million people, that's 140 million people can buy homes. So clearly, homes are being bought. But by and large, the majority of people are not in a position to be able to take part in it. And the only reason that I have avoided that reality is because of the aforementioned lack of mistakes or bad decisions for an entire adult life, mixed with the fact that interest rates were sub 3% not too long ago. And there's an entire industry out there of people trying to convince you that since they were born earlier, they are somehow harder workers that I'm never going to understand. Brian simply just says, mentally, really, what is the comparison? Well, to be fair, it is two entirely different things. Like, Donald Trump is just stupid. Donald Trump is kind of crazy, and he is showing preliminary signs of absolutely sundowning. The reason why liberals don't have a leg to stand on is because Joe Biden was actively sundowning during his presidency. There was no way to circumvent that reality. And now when people want to talk about how crazy or foolish the Trump administration sounds, conservatives have a very easy path toward just ignoring them. And I got to say, I don't blame them for a single second. Now, regular listeners outside the box know I absolutely am allowed to say whatever the hell I want, because I did not balk for a single second. As I've stated several times over, and to the new listeners on PVN, go listen to old episodes. I was calling it out since 2023. Realistically, I was calling it out since 2019 when the Democratic establishment tried to screw over Bernie Sanders a second time. Matt simply says, imagine thinking Joe Biden is mentally incapable of being president, but Donald Trump is mentally capable. Exactly. It's two sides of the same coin, and people don't even realize when they are reflecting that reality. But what are you going to do? This show deprograms people one at a time, liberal and conservative. It's a matter of getting grips on that. All I know is there is a liberal media bias and there's a Republican media bias. There is no left-leaning bias. We got far-right crackpots and Bush-era Republicans, and that's what we're voting between. And it's the Republicans' job to convince you that these new Bush-era Republicans, otherwise known as Democrats, are somehow radical leftists. And it's going to be my job to highlight, nah, they wish. Larry says, isn't an insurance commission like 80% commission? I know people in the insurance business are doing quite well. Gee, imagine that. My homeowner's insurance was $700 3 years ago. Now it's $1,500 and $2,000 a year. Mine have gone up quite a bit as well. Still haven't raised my rents yet, but I'm getting pretty close to it because of those interest rates. And Anna finishes with, well, we all have a billionaire bias. I can guarantee you I absolutely do, and they suck. All right. I got Susie, DSL Ben. I apologize. I am out of time. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the whole show, download the WHBY app. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere you get your podcasts, or check the rebroadcast on Political Voices Network at 2 o'clock today on YouTube. Talk to you guys tomorrow outside the box.